I would like to first of all say good afternoon from me and good morning to some of you, and even I think good evening to some of you. So welcome to our IORA Blue Carbon Hub webinar, and happy World Seagrass Day for those of you who recognise that. We're 2 days late for Seagrass Day. It was on the weekend, of course. And I'm also noting that I think perhaps some of you who might have wanted to join might end up watching this on recording because there's a few cyclones in the Indian Ocean at the moment. Cyclone Garance has been there, Mauritius and Reunion, and I think Cyclone Onda is somewhere between Madagascar and Mozambique at the moment. So hopefully everyone is safe and well. So the IORA Blue Carbon Hub has been in operation since 2019, and we exist as a resource for the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the 23 member states. And we provide a resource for them to assist with sustainable use and sustainable management of coastal marine ecosystems and coastal marine resources, in particular those we think of as blue carbon ecosystems. And we run a few activities each year. One of the main activities that we run is the Early Career Ocean Professionals Program. So that program has run since 2020, and it involves an 8-week placement in our hub offices in Perth, where our HQ is based. And that placement enables the successful candidates to come and work with us on a project. And that project can be quite diverse. We are pretty flexible with the sort of project. So there's been some quite sciencey kind of projects on soil carbon, on mapping, on remote sensing using satellites and drones. We've had some policy reviews. We've delved into finance, biodiversity finance, carbon finance, using accounting tools. So we do cover quite a variety of topics, and we're quite flexible. Towards the end of this webinar, I'll come back to you and give you some tips on what makes a really good application, because it's a very competitive program, and so all applications that would need to be of high quality to be considered. But first of all, you would like to hear, I think, from some of our previous applicants, and I'll start with our first cohort in 2020, and I'll move through to 2024 last year, and then, as I say, we'll come back to you. Now, before we start, you'll notice some buttons at the bottom of your screen, or at least they're at the bottom of my screen. We have a chat button. Use that to talk amongst yourselves, to make some comments, to share some thoughts. Then we have a Q&A button. So use that one to post your questions, and we will do our best to answer them. You can post them at any time using that button. You can post them for specific speakers. So, for example, if you have a particular question about someone's project, feel free to do that. Or you can post a general one about the program itself, and we will do our best to answer you. So, first of all, our first speaker, who started in 2020 and what we think of as our COVID impacted year, Milica Stankovic, who came to us from Prince of Songkhla University in Thailand and was doing some seagrass mapping. So, Milica, you have the next 10 minutes all to yourself. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Matt. Well, I'm glad to give this talk to everyone and give some to understand, so you can all see what kind of different projects we all had throughout the years. So I'll just share the screen. Hopefully it works. Is it a full screen?
It is not a full screen yet. We've got your your notes screen.
Oh, why?
And
we should have wait. Okay, I think now it should be full screen. Okay.
That is full screen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I am based in Hat Yai at Prince of Songkhla University. I was still there. I was there as a postdoc in 2020 when I applied for the early career fellowship. I'm still there, not as a postdoc, but as a research lecturer. So my university, Prince of Songkhla University, is far away from Bangkok. So we are way down in southern Thailand and close to the seagrass beds, which is good. Easy to get to the field. I belong to two different research units. One is seaweed and seagrass research unit, where we are focusing on biology, ecology, all ecosystem services of both seagrass and seaweeds in different aspects coming from taxonomy, ecology, food web, blue carbon, and so on. And also more recently, I started working at Dugong and Seagrass Research Station at the same university, of course, but we are combining the science research with veterinary care and research to produce more better management actions, both for seagrass and dugongs in terms of the policy management actions and conservation. All right, so my experience in 2020 as a COVID group was very short but sweet. I think I was there about 10 days. So we didn't have a lot of chance and opportunities to visit Perth and go around like the rest of the group. But I was there with two more people from Lahiru from Sri Lanka and Jackie from South Africa. Yeah, South Africa, and we all work in different projects. So as COVID hit and the countries were shutting down their borders, Jackie was first one to leave. I think she was there about 5 to 6 days. And I think I was on the last plane before Thailand shut down the borders. I remember coming from the field trip with Matt, and the news broke that Thailand is shutting borders over the weekend. And I remember I called Lauren. I said, Lauren, please get me a ticket. I need to fly back. Lauren was very kind enough. And next day I had the ticket for Thailand for the next few days. I think it was the last plane. It was definitely the last plane, and that's how I flew. This is from the Perth airport. We didn't know anything about COVID at that point. We just knew it was very contagious, so I was ready for the plane ride back to Thailand. But anyway, my project was basically developing a new workflow for the drone images for the analysis and processing to distinguish different seagrass species. So I wanted to see if the drone imagery was good enough so we can map different kind of species, especially in the tropical region when we have when we have multiple species combinations, and I just wanted to see if it will work. Unfortunately, with all the different data I combined and my old images and some literature reviews and data from all around Australia and the region, when I compared, I think this is actually the slide, when I did some statistical analysis, it actually showed that there was no differentiation of the species spectra, meaning that it's very hard to distinguish the species using the drone images. So then my kind of topic shifted. So this was very early on. So we kind of shifted the topic to drone-based image data management for preparing fair data sets in a marine environments, where basically we are taking the drone images from the SD card after you flew the drone and until the processing of classification and the automatic drone image management goes through. I think there are seven steps which are outlined here, and kind of reorganizes the images, gives new names based on the location where you are, creates the reports, aligns the images, so it automatically eliminates the need for the expensive softwares, which is very good, especially in this region, as not a lot of people have the budget for expensive software for stitching the images. And at the end, as a final, it creates the report in a PDF format, where it tells you how many images there are, what is the total area, gives you like a map like this. So these are all, each dot is one image, and basically prepares everything for classification of the images. And that was kind of my wrap up of the project after, I think, 2 years or even more. Because after we returned, all of us returned home, we continued to have almost monthly meetings, as I remember, for a year or so, and we continue to work on our projects even after that. So I'm still preparing this paper manuscript. Life got sidetracked somehow, but basically we created that workflow for everyone who is willing to use drone images and prepare them for classification. And so far since then, so since 2020, I continued collaborating with quite a lot of people from the hub and Matt. So in 2022, I went back to Perth, and I continued to work on my previous project that I mentioned. I gave a seminar to the group of people that were there. But I also went to AMSA conference in Cairns in 2022, where I presented the results of my research. Then in 2023, we had another gathering, one in Singapore, and we hosted Matt and the team in Thailand for some data collection. And last month, I actually hosted Jamie from the last year. She's working at NUS in Singapore, and we have a small project together, working in mangroves and seagrasses. So she came to Thailand for data collection, and probably she's coming in next few months for another season. So basically, that's my whole experience, and I'm still working with quite a lot of people. And if you have any questions related to my project, related to my current work, what I do, or anything that we do in the lab, you can freely contact me on this email or any of these social media. We'll be more than happy to answer. Okay, that's it.
Excellent. Thanks, Milica.
Am I good? 10 minutes, right?
Right on
Okay,
time.
great.
Yeah,
Great.
that's excellent. And two things to note from Milica's program. Of course, 8 weeks turned into 10 days, as Milica said.
For some of them, for Lahiro, it was longer, as I remember.
That's right. Lahiro didn't go on a repatriation flight back to Sri Lanka and ended up being in lockdown in Perth for 10 weeks, which possibly wasn't what we'd hoped for either. But we managed, and we kept the collaboration going. We just had to do it remotely. And that was, I think, going back to 2020, it was when many people were starting to think about drones for surveys, and drones are becoming a very popular. So I think Milica's work there has been quite foundational in some of the thinking. No questions in the Q&A. So just remember, if you've got questions, then pop them in the Q&A at any time, and we will address those. But without questions for now, I will next introduce Karizki Hadyanafi, who is from what I know as Bapanas, but the Ministry of National Development Planning, I think in English, isn't it? Isn't it, Kariz?
That's correct.
Karizki was here in 2022 and was really reviewing some Indonesian blue carbon policy. So over to you, Kariz. The next 10 minutes is all yours.
Right. Thank you, Pak Matt. So, good afternoon and good evening for some of you. My name is Karis. I'm from Indonesia. I'm working at the Ministry of National Development Planning, as Matt said, or Bappenas. What we do is basically we create a development plan, the national development plan, whether it is short-term annual plan of 5-year medium-term plan and the long-term plan, which is 20 years. And I specifically work for the Directorate of Marine and Fisheries sector. So in those plans, we are delving more on the marine and fisheries aspect. I was lucky to be part of the ECOP program in 2022, which had seen the decrease of COVID cases, so I can like experience the program fully for the whole 2 months. Yeah, 2 months. But although it was a post-COVID cohort, I actually somehow got COVID when I was there. Uh, so I had to work from home, home in Perth, of course, for 1 week. But uh, everybody was making sure that I'm doing well, and uh, people is always asking me like how am I at that moment, and luckily the symptom was not that bad, but I can go back to work in just 1 week, so that's a good thing. My experience, apart from the COVID experience, because that was actually the first time I got COVID, during the program was really great. I get to meet with lots of people from different topics, and I believe this cohort is the first one to have the policy aspect, because previously I thought it's called early career researcher or scientist, but now it's early career professional. So I think this is the first policy aspect of the program. And at that time, I was the only one who are working for the policy side, but the other one was working on like science part. So I really learned a lot about the science, because as a policy maker, I usually sit behind the desk. So I never had an encounter with field work or lab work, but during the 2 months, I got to see my colleagues working like on the corner here. Mir and Sandy is working in the lab, processing some soil samples, and also I saw like some people working on remote sensing. So it's really beneficial to see all the process in the blue carbon sector. So my project, as Matt mentioned, is basically looking at what are the challenges and opportunities to finance blue carbon ecosystem conservation, particularly through carbon offset program. Because at that point, Indonesian government is just taking attention to carbon value. Previously, the carbon trading already take place in Indonesia, but I think government involvement was a bit low. But then in 2021, the government released the presidential decree on carbon economic value, and everything started to take off from there. So, but the marine sector is still like lagging in that presidential sector. Like there needs to be a more detailed regulation. So I'm looking at what should be taken into attention when we are going to move forward, especially in the blue carbon sector. So I try to identify what stakeholders are involved, who has the authorities to do what, and how our blue carbon is actually managed in Indonesia. Also, I'm looking at blue carbon credit potential, like in the carbon market, and also I try to learn what is exactly a carbon project. So what are the life cycle, and how can we do have the projects in Indonesia, but still maintaining the quality of the conservation and the restoration of the ecosystem. So after learning all of that, these are some of my recommendations. Basically, just to clarify authorities on who manage blue carbon, who has authorities over which blue carbon, because blue carbon is usually located in the coastal ecosystem, and coastal management sometimes is colored with overlapping authorities, and also so I try to propose to clarify more on the authorities and also the permitting and licensing mechanisms. The next one is about the local government, because in Indonesia we have a national and local government. So I think local government should be more involved in the process of blue carbon offset project, and also uh, we need to improve our data inventory, because at the moment I think mangrove we have a mangrove map, national mangrove map, but for seagrass there are lots of work that needs to be done to establish at least a baseline for carbon. And I think the fourth is the most critical point is we have to decide how we want to harness the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, whether we want to only fulfill the NDC or we also want to uh, establish like a market mechanism. I think that's a question that needs to be addressed to be able to move to uh, carbon projects. And also the other one is looking at the different types of markets and ensuring the involvement of the local community. Uh, at this point, after the new administration, I think lots have been done, and um, like last year, MMIF, the Ministry of Marine Affairs, just released the derivative regulation on carbon economic value in the ocean sector. So I think uh, my research here is already a lot of change happened, so needs some adjustment, of course. And I want to thank my collaborators. At that point, I was working with Matt from CSIRO, and also several people who was involved in blue carbon from different sectors, like private sectors, and also the researcher and some policymaker as well. And one of the outcome of my research was I write an article in the conversation with my collaborators from C4. And I also mentioned that it's developed during the IORA Early Career Professional Program. And right now, from my study, we have secured funding from AFD to improve my study, like getting more a bigger scale and more detailed information, which aims to integrate the blue carbon into our national policy through IBCSF, the Blue Carbon Policy Framework. We aim to develop a blue carbon roadmap and assess some regulation and initiative regarding access to blue carbon credit, and also provide some recommendation for NDC update. And also, we would like to give some inputs to Indonesian blue carbon baseline through field measurement and sampling, and also develop some MRV guideline, especially for local governments, so they can be involved more in the process. So we have 3 locations in Indonesia, and these are just some pictures of when I did some field work to collect data. And on the right is actually I just come back from a training in Singapore about nature-based carbon project MRV, which information I got from the alumni WhatsApp group. So thank you, Pak Matt, for sharing the information, and I finally get accepted. So yeah, the program is actually helping me to get more knowledge into the blue carbon, and also uh, get some networks to work further in the blue carbon area. So maybe that's all. Thank you, Pak.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, Pak. And there are a few, I think, tips that I was going to bring up at the end that I think you've highlighted there. Tips on what we're looking for and what will make a really good application. One of those is what's the broader relevance of the work that you're proposing, and I think Karis has highlighted that it's not just about research. There's lots that can be done in policy, lots that can be done in investigating finance, and so what we're looking for is what is that broader relevance, and how can you put the context of an 8-week project in a journey, your career journey, but also in what's going on that other IORA member states can learn. And then the other aspect is the list of collaborators. So it's quite an advantage to have some well thought through collaborators in your application. And that's something that we can help. And we know that as an early career professional, not everybody has access to collaboration networks. And so contacting us and we're able to help. And congratulations on the training program in Singapore. It's great to hear that
It's great to
you're
hear.
able
And
to.
like during the training, I just found that now there are so many literatures on like blue carbon and carbon credits compared to when I was working with the ECOP. So I think it's fantastic and should be so maybe future projects could be like more specific and more detailed from what I did.
So there's questions starting to come in. So thank you for the questions. And maybe since we have a question, you can think about whether this is one that you could answer. But so question is from Abu Sumaya. Hello, Abu. And it is based on the research projects. Do you have any streamlined procedure to real life implementation of the output results? And I think you started to talk about implementation in one of your later slides when you were talking about some of the baseline field data collection. Is there anything you wanted to expand on from that?
Well, so is the question about the project that I'm working at?
Let's say that you can answer it in the context of the
Okay,
project that you're
so
working in.
yeah, basically what I did was just because I'm not the scientist myself, right? So I only oversee
Right.
the process, like how people work in the field to collect the data and uh, how the samples are processed in the labs, etc. So I think in the real life, what I learned in the ECOP project, in the ECOP program was I was exposed early from the experience. As I mentioned before, I saw like how my colleagues working in the lab, calculating LOI and all that kind of stuff. It really helps me to put into perspective on what should be done during the data collection process, and also at least I have some knowledge to oversee the whole process, because as I told you, I'm not a scientist myself. So it's really good to learn how in general the whole procedure to collect the data and to process it.
Excellent. Thank you, Bakaris. And Abu, the answer, I mean, there'll be many different answers to your question depending on the local context, but which we might be able to touch on a little later. The next from 2023, we had how many did we have in 2023? We had a few people come from different countries, and one of them was Andriambola, Tsiory, Mashiyyat. We, of course, just say Mashiyyat. It's so much easier. And Mashiyyat came from University of Toliara in southwest of Madagascar. Although I think Mashi, you're safe in Tana at the moment. So
Yes,
good. It's good to see you. Good to see you safe and well. And over to you for the next 10 minutes.
So thank you for giving me the floor. Is it working?
It is working. We don't have full screen, but we can see your slide. If you want it, yes, that should work. Waiting, it's all good. Thank you, Mashi. You're good to go.
So for the title, it was hard, so I just put from ECOP to consultant on seagrass. Okay, so for introduction, I am Mashiyyat. I'm from the University of Toliara, the Fishery and Marine Science Institute, if it is in English, but in French it is IHSM. And I was a research assistant before applying for the fellowship. And also I had already worked on on mangrove ecosystem before applying. So that's why I applied for this fellowship, because I saw some gaps on the carbon finance in Madagascar. So my work during the fellowship was to study the carbon finance in Madagascar. So it was more likely a policy review on national and international policies on climate change, but also an analysis of Madagascar carbon mechanisms. It was like the work of Karizki, the previous ECOP. So as experience, we worked on the production of two papers. One was a policy brief, and it's still ongoing process with Matt, and the other one is a fact sheet that was aimed to be used by the stakeholders. And the fellowship gives me networking, such as I said earlier, Karizki, and also different experts. So now I think it's just an overview, but currently I'm still working at the University of Toliara, and we have the IORA project, which was launched by UECN under the Great Blue Wall Initiative that try to have effective, equitable, and inclusive long-term conservation of coastal biodiversity, which is the seagrass. And the project is on 5 countries. We have Comoros, Kenya, Madagascar, Mozambique, and Tanzania. And this project has 2 components. The first one is the assessment of seagrass ecosystems, and the second one is the mapping of seagrass bed. So I involved on the first one, which is the assessment of seagrass ecosystems. So the assessment of seagrass ecosystem is more likely what I did before, but it is more on the ecological knowledge of seagrass here in Madagascar, and to work on the policy and governance, but also to try to find out the institutional mapping about seagrass research, infrastructure, and to find the trend on research on seagrass here in Madagascar and what are the gaps. So this assessment should be produced at the end of this year and present.
Mashiyyat, I think we lost you. Testing. We'll just give it a minute and see if we can get Mashiyyat back online. And so while we're waiting to see if we get Mashiyyat back online, I'll just highlight. So Mashiyyat has mentioned that he produced a policy brief and a fact sheet. And of course, before that, Karizki has talked about that he produced a report and ended up writing an article in The Conversation, which is an online blog style of reporting. And so that's a highlight that there are many kinds of outputs that can be created as well. So a scientist as part of the program might think of the more traditional kinds of outputs like a research paper, and we certainly encourage those where they're relevant, and several of the ECOPs have published research papers. But when we're thinking about policy and we're thinking about finance, policymakers and financiers don't typically read a science paper, but they will read short, pointed documents or briefings of other kinds, and that's why we think about things like a policy brief. So another tip for your application is think about what the end outcome will be. All right, how are we going? I'll wait, and I think Lauren's going to try and contact Mashiyyat. All right, so while we're waiting to see if we can get Mashi back online, let's jump to 2024 and Josphat. I'm just checking how we're going with questions. We'll come back to questions. Josphat, you there?
Yeah.
He's
Okay.
there. Okay, so just last year and in July and August 2024, we had the program, and Josphat was one of 5 people in the program last year. So Josphat Gacoki Nguu from Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research. Oh, Mashi's back. All right, Mashi, we will come back to you since you've got your system back up, but we'll go ahead with Josphat. Since he's got his slides up, we'll go ahead with Josphat. Then we'll come back to you, Mashi. All right, Josphat, back over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to the participants. So my name is Josphat. Are you able to see my screen?
We can see your screen very well, but we can't see you.
Let me see. This should be. Just 1 minute. Let's try.
If you figure out your camera, that's good. If not, there we go.
Up now.
We have, okay, now we've got your smiling face, and see if you can get your slides back on.
Yes, let me try one more time.
So while you're doing that, so you've seen we've covered a few different countries as we've gone around. So since 2020, I can say we've had 15 ECOP from 10 different IORA member states. All right, so put it in slide mode, and you're good to go. All right, over to you, Josphat.
Okay, so my name is Josphat. I'm from Kenya. And my background is on marine ecology. So when you see me there, that represents the ocean bit of it. So I was one of the participants in the 2024 IORA ECOP fellowship with a number of other participants from, I think we were 6 of us, 2 from Indonesia, 1 from Sri Lanka, 1 from Singapore, 1 from Bangladesh, and then I from Kenya. So in this, we like the previous presenters have said, the ECOP is an opportunity or a hub where people who are interested in the blue ecosystem can come and advance their knowledge, their science, or maybe their thoughts on a topic in the blue carbon ecosystem. So for me, I was working on seagrass, and I also realized the former or the previous speakers, they've touched on seagrass. So it means this is a well-represented World Seagrass Day celebration. So in this aspect, I was looking at seagrass, but I was just analyzing on what my former speakers were talking about. Like Mika was on mapping Karizki was on policy and Mashi was on assessment. Now we are trying to look at how do we go about now monetizing all these aspects of the seagrass ecosystem, and that's where the topic on my app or my topic was on seagrass carbon offset project, developing seagrass carbon offset project. So one might ask why seagrass? So if you look at this map, we have now like a global map showing the distribution of blue carbon projects. But if you look carefully, most of these projects are on mangroves. Yet we say seagrass covers almost all the continents. So why are we not having so much of seagrass project in our ecosystem or in our countries? So that's when now my topic came into being. So we're trying to look at why do we have so many mangrove projects, yet seagrass also plays almost similar role with mangrove. So in this topic, we were trying to understand what's the challenge that's facing the seagrass in terms of developing carbon offset projects. So one thing that came out was that in the mangrove sphere, there is quite an advancement in terms of the materials that are being produced, in terms of the guidelines that are being produced, expertise. I think Mashi will concur with me. The number of experts in the seagrass globally is very minimal compared to the number of experts in mangrove. So if we don't also advance the way we go about seagrass, we might maybe overlook seagrass, yet it covers a bigger portion of our ocean. So what I was trying to do in my topic, together with my collaborators and experts, was to come up with a simplified way of maybe a flow of how do we go about starting a carbon offset project, and what are the key items that you need to check so that you have a foundation of the carbon offset project. So what we also realize is because of the different geographical settings or the countries, so what we have here as a flow chart might differ a little bit, but it's a general flow that can be used and can be tweaked to fit each and every maybe requirement. So I think I'll be answering the question of Christy on how do you go about understanding starting up a carbon offset project and then making it into flotation. So in here is just a general flow. Otherwise, if we were dig deep into it, it might take the 8 weeks. Matthew attested it took us 8 weeks to come up with this flow, and because we had to go back and forth on trying to understand. So if we say A, what will be the repercussion of that? How simple will it be for people to understand what we mean by that? So the first step we came up with two steps that we supposed to first of all understand. One of them was to understand or to what to consider when starting a carbon offset project. So the baseline of it. So there are quite a number of yes and no questions that we need to ask ourselves so that at least we can come to a common understanding. Can we do a carbon offset, seagrass carbon offset project in this area or not? So once we go through this flow up to where we are able to say, yes, we can do a carbon offset project from there, then comes now the part of Mashi, where they are doing now the ecological bit of it, the assessment. Yes, we say we can do a carbon offset project in the seagrass of this area, but then Mashi will help tell us what species are there, what are the ecological conditions. So if we get into that ecological condition, will we be getting the maximum amount of carbon that those seagrass, when protected, will give us returns back? So that's where now the selection of the suitable seagrass comes into place. So there are quite a number of also items that we need to look into. So the location of where we want to set up the carbon offset project, the size of the area that we want to take into the carbon offset project. Remember, we're talking about what's the return. So if we do the investment, say I invest 100,000 USD, what would be my return? If I do a small area, will they get that return or not? So all this becomes some of now the steps that we came into being, or that we were able to come into agreement that this would be the baseline, or would be the general highlights or items that when you're starting a carbon offset project in the seagrass, you need to fast track them and get them into a deeper understanding. So from there, then once you now agree now you want to invest in this, you have all the pros and the cons of doing a seagrass carbon offset project in a certain area, in a certain size of the acreage that you want to do this. So what came out of this is during this period, while I was in Australia, I was still also consulting with a team that I was working with in Kenya to do a carbon offset project in seagrass in Vanga. So by the time I was coming back from Australia, and also from the knowledge that I was able to garner from that experience or that fellowship, now we can comfortably refer people to the Vanga Seagrass Carbon Offset project in Kenya, whereby you'll be able to see all the processes that we've talked summarized in the previous slide were able to be followed to a point that even the community were able to settle on a certain site, giving them all the reasons as to why. Why did we settle to a certain site when you have so many seagrass around that area? So this was the output of the fellowship that I took while in Australia. So apart from that, you realize that it gives you, or during that period, now that you have 8 weeks, it gives you a dedicated period of time without any interruption, only waking up 5, going back to sleep at 10, but only thinking about seagrass. So it gives you like uninterrupted time to think about one topic and dive into it into deeper details. So by the time you are coming out of the 8 weeks, you have a broader understanding of a certain topic that you are working on. And also from that, then you create a huge network of different experts. So we have ecologists, we have species experts, we have soil experts, we have water flow experts. So you get to understand all the basics and all the intertwined factors that go into a certain topic. So additionally, it gives you now also the platform to share with others. So this, like what we are doing now, is one of the many things now I've been doing since I came back from Australia. So we've been talking about different ways of how people can tap into the resources that they have. Yeah, we have seagrass. Communities along the coastline are crying that they don't get a lot. The fish is dwindling. So what are the other alternatives, or what other resources are there that they can explore? And one of them we are talking about is the seagrass carbon credit. So in Kenya, we could say we are able now to do, like in a community-based aspect, we can start from the scratch up to the end, and we are able to develop a carbon offset project wherever we will be drawn into. And also it gives you also time to enjoy with the different cultures. So you are there to learn about a certain topic on blue carbon ecosystem, but you are not running on silos. So you need also to understand what are other people's culture, how do they live, and what's the connection between them and the ocean. So it becomes like another new family away from your family. And then back home, you continue sensitizing the community, working with them, doing the hands-on, because I think the community understands better when they are able to relate whatever is on the theoretical aspect. Can they relate it on the ground, and how would they easily be able to see or understand what we are talking in the science bit of it? So at the same time, we are talking about carbon market trading. So we are not trading something that's not there. So from those aspects, then we also need to convince, or we also need to tell people what are the basic science that you need to understand before you already say you want to do carbon trading. So you have Article 6 in Paris Agreement, but then before you go to Article 6 in Paris Agreement, what are the basics? Do the community understand what we are talking about at Article 6 on the Paris Agreement? So if they commit to participating in that, what would be their contribution on that? And now from that, I'm working in a new project, but in a different company now. The project is on Regional Center of Excellence for Biodiversity, Forest and Seascape, where I'm the lead ecologist in the seascape ecosystem. So one of my tasks is trying to gather enough information among 24 countries in South and Eastern and South Africa on the marine ecosystem and how they can tap into the resources and come up with a livelihood solution. One of them being the carbon market. How do they tap into the carbon market and maybe benefit out of that? So maybe another thing we need to understand is, so apart from going to Australia, it also gives you now the opportunity to look at other opportunities that are interconnected. So while there, you meet different experts. So it's up to you to also think, yes, I met Matt, we were talking about seagrass, but then the ocean is very big. Matt might give me funding for seagrass, but then back home, I'm required also to talk about mangroves. Yeah. So how do I get funding for the mangroves? I need to get experts. I need to collaborate with the different people working in different aspects of the blue carbon ecosystem. So maybe one thing we need to understand is blue carbon ecosystem. Like we have three critical ecosystem. We have mangroves, seagrass, and corals. So all these ecosystems are interconnected. So when you understand one, you also need to understand what's the working of this other one, so that at least you are able to tell, how do I synergize? So the people who are looking at seagrass, how should they be connected with the people who are looking after mangroves, and how they support to be connected with the people who are looking at the coral. So from this, it gives you now the opportunities that you can get funding and then collaborate with other people. You can also get different projects that you need to lead now that you have a deeper understanding of a certain topic and you can do it comfortably. So I think I don't think that it's already announced, but for those who are interested in it, you should look out for the 2025 IORA ECOP application announcement. I think Lauren will be able to tell us when that comes out, and maybe people can mark their calendar. And then try to apply early, but also follow some guidance. When you are doing your application, you need to also convince the people, the panel who are selecting you. Why do I need to go there? What would be my contribution to the hub? Yeah. So let's look at that, but also be passionate about what you want to do. I think that's what drives everything. Otherwise, when you don't have the passion, it will be very difficult even when writing the application yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josphat. And Josphat's presentation really shows us that the diversity of different topics that ECOPs have had over the years. So now we've heard about some research and some mapping type projects, some policy reviews, thinking about the development of markets and the finance. So it's really quite a there's lots of possibilities in terms of the topics that you can explore. So there's a couple of questions for you, Josphat, coming in. So let's look at those, and then we can get into the broader tips and experiences. So one from Christina Narendra. What is it about the site selection criteria matrix if the locations and contexts are different? So I know you mentioned that we talked about this for 8 weeks because that was a lot of what you were trying to consider. What are your thoughts on that one?
Come up again. I didn't get the question to me.
Thinking about the site selection criteria matrix if the locations and contexts are different.
We realize that people have this general aspect of, because we have seagrass, we can do a carbon offset project. But I'll tell you, different areas will have different repercussions. So, for example, you have an area whereby it's highly eroding or has high wave energy, and you want to put your carbon offset project in that area. So what will be the repercussion of that? So again, assume the area you want to put up as a carbon offset project is a traffic line, or where ships come to dock or boats come to dock, and then you want to put your project there. There will be a lot of conflict between you, the carbon developer, and the people who are using that area. For example, the boat anchors. Let's say the community. That's where they come to anchor their boats. But within that area, there is a lot of seagrass. So if you say you want to set your carbon offset there, do you have an agreement with the people that when they are coming to dock there, they will not use their anchors to that area? Remember, the carbon offset project is meant to alleviate the human pressures per se that's causing the seagrass in a certain area to dwindle. So we need to understand all the inner workings of a certain area that we are talking about. So we need to understand maybe the site there, maybe the species that's there, because we have some species that are very, we call them colonizers. They might not have a huge amount of carbon in that area, but then they are part of a bigger ecosystem. So when you are doing, or when you are setting, or when you are selecting a site, you need to understand. So if I choose these sites, what species are there, and what are their feasibility, or what are their ability to tap the sediment, to tap in the carbon, and also how well can they rejuvenate in case they've been destroyed, but then a measure of conservation has been put into place. So that's why I was saying the general flow might look a little bit simple, the yes and no question, but then if we go into deeper details, then we'll start now understanding why are we saying we need to have a very precise area that we want to select. One, we also don't want to have conflict with other people using the same area. And also you want to show that before you started this carbon offset project, this was the scenario. And after putting enough measures of conservation or efforts to reduce threats this area, you are able to achieve a progressive improvement in the seagrass area. So that's why there is quite a number of things that we need to understand about the site so that we can settle on a certain area, and we are comfortable that when we invest in this, we will not going to get maybe washed off. So you invest this amount of money with the assurance that this area will remain or will improve because of ABCD in that area.
And for Christina, I think part of the answer is that the matrix and the criteria exist because everywhere is different, and so there's a series of questions that help you think about those contexts and help you make decisions at different stages. One more for you, Josphat, before we go to a panel. So from Permana Yudiaso, hi Josphat, how can we develop a better carbon market combining mangrove and seagrass? There you go, that's a challenging one.
So I think maybe I'll give you my experience from the Kenyan side. Like what we're saying, the Vanga Seagrass project is, as we call it, we've bundled it with the mangrove carbon offset project. In the same area that we are having the Vanga Seagrass project, we're also having a Vanga mangrove blue carbon project. And like I said, mangrove, seagrass, and corals are interconnected. So we are saying if we protect mangrove, it's very high likely that we also protecting the seagrass. So the best one, or the best approach that we've tried now, is trying to bundle the mangrove and seagrass. So while we are doing the mangrove conservation, we also tap into the seagrass, because we still have this aspect of the seagrass. The carbon in the seagrass is quite dynamic. So how do we now show that by protecting mangrove, you're also protecting the seagrass? So when we do the carbon offset project in mangrove, we bundle it with the seagrass, and that's where we are able to get like premium credits from the conservation. Because you can't say you are protecting mangrove alone without considering that whenever I protect mangrove, I'll be able also to convince other people, or the people who are using the seagrass, that we need to have the whole of this area in a well-conserved area so that we can be able to benefit from it in the carbon trading markets. That's the approach that we're working with the community. It might be a little bit different from other places and other contexts, depending on who is being involved in that area and how easy is it to work with the people who are working in the two ecosystems. Like in Kenya, there are two, like we would say, two different organizations or entities. One is the beach management unit, which is in charge of the seagrass, and then we have the community forest association, which is in charge of the forest. But all of these are in the same village. So you find that it is just like a family. So you only need to convince them when we do A, it's also trickles down to this other ecosystem that we are talking about. So even when we are discussing about a carbon offset project in mangrove, we're always trying to tell them what's the connection between the mangroves and the seagrass, and what would be the repercussion of if one of them is destroyed. What would be the repercussion of that?
Thank you, Josphat. All right, let's move to the panel and some of the broader discussion. So maybe all our speakers can come back with their cameras on. Now, first of all, I did say that I was going to give some tips for applications, but Josphat has suggested keeping an eye on when the applications are open. So my announcement for you is that applications are open now, and they will close on the 31st of March. So Lauren, I think, will be able to put the registration link in the chat. And so you'll see a series of questions when you're starting to apply. So as you're thinking about those questions and how to write, as Josphat has said, how to write an application that will stand out, because it's a competitive program to give you. Now, we want to encourage you to apply, but also be aware that it is very competitive, and only the highest quality of applications get through. So look at the instructions, read our FAQ, our frequently asked question document, and make sure that you're eligible is probably the first step. So looking at the eligibility, so if you are a resident or a citizen of one of the 23 IORA member states, and you are less than 5 years since your most recent degree, then you are eligible. Now, we don't distinguish between degrees because every country is different. So for us, it doesn't matter whether you've got an undergraduate degree or whether you've got a PhD. Whatever is your most recent, as long as you graduated from it 5 years or less ago. So for us this year, that means 2020 onwards. If you graduated before 2020, then you won't be eligible this year. All right, then objectives. Make sure you have really clear objectives, and make sure that what you're proposing to do is flexible, because I think you've heard from everyone of our 4 speakers today that they arrived with a plan, and then the plan had to change because other things needed to be considered. So it needs to be feasible, but it also being aware that 8 weeks seems like a long time in the beginning, and 8 weeks can go very quickly, and something that you thought was going to be very easy to do becomes quite a challenge. And I know that for some of our friends online, there was a lot of reading of very dense policy documents and a lot of searching online and a lot of going through a lot of things. And for Milica, a lot of learning of some new coding skills. So some aspects might take a little longer than you anticipate. Also, I think you've got a sense from these presentations about the context that we're looking for. We're looking for projects that have a broader context. So, a small study that's on a fairly localized question is probably not going to be ranked as highly as something that's going to have a broader context and messages that might be translated into policy that other member states can learn from as well. And also, we want to know about your career and where you want to head. So something that we're interested in is how it enhances your career opportunities. So have a clear idea of what the program will do for you and tell us. Okay, so they're the main tips. We can touch on a few more. Now, we did get some questions as part of the registration process. We'll see if any more questions do come online as part of the Q&A. If you have questions for me or for Lauren or Mark or any of the panelists, then please post them and we'll do our best to answer them. But now that we have a panel, I'm going to ask them several questions that we received that I think are better answered by them than by me. So we'll go through each question. I'll give everyone the opportunity to answer them in the order that they gave their presentations. So question number one, what are the advantages to participating in the ECOP program? And question number two, after the program, what kind of support do you get? Milica, do you want to have a go at answering those two questions? Or
Sure.
at least giving your perspective?
Yeah, I think my perspective will be a bit different. So in terms of support, we received enormous support because, I mean, we were online. So we were, as I mentioned, we were meeting once a month, as I remember, for a year or so, or I think maybe even longer than that. And basically going through all the difficulties that everyone and our project is facing. So we received quite a lot of support during the whole, I would say, COVID group. Because ours was not only 8 weeks, so it was much, much longer. And even after our year of support ended, I would say, we continued to talk to each other and to meet each other and to kind of bounce off each other ideas and so on. Recently, I contacted Jackie about her work and her modeling because I needed some help. So, and then when I was in Sri Lanka, I was with Hiro and talking about his work. So support doesn't always come from Matt, Lauren, and Mark, but also from your fellow team members. And then the advantage is, I would say, networking. That's, I think, one of the biggest one, because I met so many people during even 10 days. It was still a huge number of people that I'm still working with, not only from IORA Blue Carbon Hub, also the people that were together with me, but next rounds of fellows, but also the people who are helping me to work on my project. So it's quite a lot of people that I'm still in contact with, and I could still send an email for whatever collaboration I'm looking for. So that would be kind of my answer, I would say. The key points.
Thanks, Milica. Akaras.
Yeah, I think my answer will more or less similar with Milica, but like the advantages, I believe it's the networking. During my program, I met with, because the networking in this program is not only limited to those involved in the program, but sometimes it can extend to like a broader community, like in CSIRO or maybe in the UWA. For example, like I met an Indonesian researcher who was a math student by Ayu, and we are actually working together in the project that I mentioned before. So I think that's one of the example of the kind of networking that you can get from the program. And as for the support, I think I also kind of touched on that earlier, like the training program that I get the information from the group. I think it's a huge advantage to be in that same group with information related to blue carbon and topics that you're probably interested in. So I think that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. Mashi.
For me, the main advantages were mainly support from nearly fellow, such as Karizki, because we had the similar study. Is it good? Okay. So
Yep.
for me, the advantage were mainly support from early fellow, like Karizki, and also networking with different people, such as the former High Commissioner in Mauritius. And for support, it was during the writing process of the policy review with Matt, and also the drafting of the fact sheet with Lauren.
Excellent. Thank you, Mashiyyat. And Josphat.
Yes, so for me, the advantages of being in the program, I've come to learn the networking bit of it is quite critical. I think my colleagues have said it's not just networking about the people within the IORA, but also beyond that. Like 2 weeks ago, I met Professor Pere. He came to Kenya, Matt, and they are trying to develop a project with Kenya Marine and Fishery Research Institute on how to standardize the carbon. I think he works in the Atomic Agency.
Mm-hmm.
So they are trying to set up a project in Kenya that's running along the Western Indian Ocean and trying to see how can they standardize the carbon methodology, and also using Kenya and the carbon project in Kenya as the baseline or the pilot. So that gives you a good networking, and also gives you now a platform where now you can even go higher from what you are doing there before. And also the network. Maureen, I also appreciate that you have the WhatsApp network. It's always giving us new opportunities that are coming in. So if you dive into it, then you're able to see what opportunities are there, and you can take advantage of the calls, maybe the funding that are there, and you apply and work with those aspects bit of it. And also, also while you're there, I also met our Kenyan ambassador in Perth, and then they were like trying to understand. So you mean there is this opportunity we've never tapped into it? So they are wondering that they contribute to the kitty, but then they never have people now trying to understand what is it that goes into it. So from there, they are asking, is it possible to expand this network and have so many people now also come to part and learn ABCD on what's happening between Kenya and Australia in the aspect of the science development and any studies that can be in collaboration with that. So there's quite a number of things you can look up into while you are in that program.
Excellent. So thank you, everyone. And so there is a theme, and those themes really touch on the answer that I would have given, or about what we try to achieve. And what we're trying to achieve as part of the program is, first of all, an individual opportunity. So there's a learning opportunity during the 8 weeks that you're in Perth, and that's an opportunity, as Josphat mentioned earlier, to spend a designated period of time just really trying to think about one problem or one set of problems, and working through some solutions to that, and tapping into the knowledge around us. But then it's a collective effort as well, and a collective program where we're trying to develop those networks. The Indian Ocean is large, and as I've mentioned several times, we have 23 countries that are member states of IORA, and so building the dialogue among those member states at an early career level, and not waiting until people are senior enough that they start flying to meetings, but building that dialogue, building the networks, getting some knowledge exchange going, and then the resources that we supply afterwards vary according to what we're able to, but fundamentally we have a WhatsApp group that everyone keeps in touch, and we try and provide information. So through that WhatsApp group, Pakaris mentioned the opportunity that you got to go to Singapore. So sending out those kind of opportunities is a big part of what we're trying to achieve. All right, looking at some of the other questions, there is a question come in through the Q&A. Keep them coming. Is there any program for senior level? And the answer at the moment is no, not yet. That is something that we certainly could consider for future years if that's something that IORA is interested in. I also had a question come in earlier through the registration. Can can I join online? And that is a question we get most years, and the answer again is no. The whole point of it is to participate in person in Perth, because the advantages of being part of what's a residential program, interacting with your peers, and also interacting with collaborators in Perth is supposed to be the advantage of the program. Other questions? So key qualities that make an application stand out. I think I've covered off some of those, but I'll see if I can look again. And the benefits offered by the program. So how can you plan your work effectively before the program? This is one that I might get the panel to answer as well. So thinking about your experiences, team, now that you know what you know now, what advice would you give for a new applicant about how to plan for your experience? Let's go in reverse order this time. Let's start at Josphat and go backwards. Josphat.
Maybe planning for the experience. I think, to me, I would say, don't plan per se. You just be there and let the plan take its course. Because sometimes you might plan you want to do ABCD, but it never materializes. But then when you let chances happen, then you find you are enjoying more than when you had planned previously. You can plan, like I would also say, like we planned with Matt on how I'm going to spend the 8 weeks, especially on the topics. But then you reach there and everything changes. But it changes on a good note because you are learning from now what's happening on the ground. We were with Mark. We went to, what's the name? The island. I think there is one thing I would say, maybe make sure you visit. There is a certain island. I'm forgetting.
Rottnest Island.
Matt? Exactly. I actually we were thinking, Matt, maybe we need to change the location of the course to Rottnest.
We need to all move to Rottnest.
Because you get all the experience. If you are looking into birds and how birds use the ocean, you'll be able to see that. If you're looking at the seagrass, if you're looking at what, you'll be able to. But what I could say is, as much as you planning, I wouldn't say you stick too much to the plan per se. Okay, have a sketch of what you'd want to do, but then let the nature take its place. Remember, you are learning, it's a science-based course. Yes, you can have a process of maybe titration or what, but then at times you also need to understand how does nature respond to such maybe the human way of life. That's my way,
All right.
I would say.
So Josphat says, don't plan. All right. What about you, Mashiyyat?
So about me, you have to be subscribed to different platforms, because when I was doing the policy review, there was one paper that appeared in the middle of my work, so I had to readjust my work from this paper. So my advice is to be up to date.
Be up to date. That is actually good advice as well. So yes, know your subject when you arrive. I think that's good advice for any part of life, right?
Yes.
Pakaris.
Okay, as someone who works in the Ministry of Planning, I have to disagree with Josphat. I think you should plan. Well, you should plan, but you have to leave some degree for flexibility, like don't plan too detailed that you cannot make change, because it will change. But I think you still should plan nonetheless. And one of the ways that I try to plan is to get in touch with the collaborators early, especially if some of the collaborators are located in your country. You can ask to meet them before you go to Perth, and maybe like get some feedbacks on your research proposal. What should you do? What kind of steps should you go to proceed with your project and that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the advice that I could give.
So Josphat's from the Ministry of Not Planning. Karis from the Ministry of Planning says have a plan, but be prepared to change it. So.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be, I think, somewhere in the middle, because I planned, but then it all went out through the window.
Yes.
I did not plan. My plan was not like in details, but I kind of knew what I wanted to do and how to do it. I just needed more technical skills and help to do it. But then it just didn't work out. So I did it officially. I was able to do it. It wasn't just the results that I was hoping for, but I mean, the results were still, those results are still good results. We know we cannot do it now. But then I had to switch 180 degrees to something else, and kind of use all the experience and time and everything on something else, and try to figure out how I want to continue to develop this project, still with the same idea that I had before, but then on different note, I would say. So it's be flexible. Because you never know what's gonna happen. I mean, it's fine to plan. Some people just plan, some people not. It depends. But I'm just be flexible. That was my experience.
Be flexible, especially if you get caught up in a global pandemic, I think.
Yes.
All right. There's a question from Farhana Mustari. Hello, Farhana. With the application, do you need nomination or endorsement from your home country's ministry or institute? So the answer is that you will need final endorsement from your country's focal point, the IORA focal point. So there's two ways that we can do that. One is if you happen to know who the focal point is, that you can seek endorsement prior to application. But most people don't know who the focal point is. It's not usually common knowledge. So the way that we normally do it, Farhana, is that we review the applications, and then once we get the final preferred candidates, we go to the focal points who are in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for each country, and we ask for their endorsement. So this year, to give you some idea of the process, the program will happen in July and August. So the 8-week placement in Perth will be in July and August 2025. We have the deadline for the applications at the end of March. And then there's a process where we will consider the applications and rank them and select our preferred candidates. Then some of the time after that will be trying to get endorsement through the IORA processes, including the IORA focal points, such that we hope to have everyone who is selected and endorsed notified by the end of May. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Farhana, and that is a good question. And probably others had that. So with 5 minutes to go, we'll see if any other questions pop up. I might give Lauren the floor. Lauren, do you want to have some reflections on some of the logistics, that either answering questions that you think people might have, or just giving an update on logistical considerations and what the process is in Perth?
Yeah. Some people might have projects that they would like to send sediment samples to Australia. And if you do want to do that, you will need to let us know in the application, because bringing these samples in do require quite some time for Australian customs to clear when they come into Australia. So if you can let us know at the start, that would be great. We'll also need some time to process. So you'll be applying for visas, and obviously we'll be able to reimburse you on those. But just just to note that that does take some time. So please make sure that if you are successful and you have had approvals to go, that you'll need to plan for those. And also within when you're applying, just to note that we do try and find you a place to live, and that's as close as we can get to the office. But obviously, getting it nearby is not always guaranteed. But you just to note as well that you will be living with possibly with mixed male and female people. So just to note that. But I have put the link into the call out in the chat there, and that will actually send you to the website, which will give you some already frequently asked questions that you can go through, and it will then send you to an application form which will be online, and just take some time to look through some of those questions before you fill that out. The only other thing to mention as well is please, you can directly contact me and Matt as well if you want to have any advice on any collaborators.
Absolutely. In fact, if you've got any questions about your application as you're preparing it, for example, if you want to know, is my project in scope? If I have an idea, I'm not sure if it's an eligible idea, ask us. Send us a brief description of what you're proposing. If you have any questions about any of the way that the program works or about how the selection works, then ask us. All right, so no more questions. So there is one more, actually, there is a question we haven't really addressed, which I'll quickly whip around the panel. Everyone can have 30 seconds to look at this one. What are the key factors to consider when starting a project like this? All right, does anyone have any immediate answers? What are the key factors to consider when you're starting your ECOP project? Does anyone want to take that? I'll just open it up. Or is that too hard to answer?
I guess maybe know your problems and know that there are some ways to address those problems, I guess. Maybe that's what I think.
Yep. And problems do emerge, and we do our best to solve them.
I would add doability, that you can do it within the time frame that you're given. Just because, I mean, everyone thinks, oh, 8 weeks is enough time. Not really.
Yes,
it flies very quickly. And I mean that we are coming back to the planning. But if you find the gap in whatever topic you're thinking of applying, just think of it in a not too small scope, but not too large scope. Just you can have enough time to finish majority of the work while you were there. That will be
absolutely. And if you don't know if it's feasible, if you have some questions, then ask us. We have some reasonable experience, as Milica said, and in fact, I think as everyone has highlighted, 8 weeks goes very fast, and what you think is possible at the beginning changes because you have to adapt. All right, so one more question come in. Let's see if we can answer that. Okay, the criteria, the applications will be evaluated. I went through those before, but I'll just recap on those very briefly. So whether the objectives are clear, whether it is feasible, the project is feasible, whether it has a broader context and will extend knowledge, whether it is going to enhance the career development and career journey of the applicant, and whether there are clearly identified and thought through collaborators. So they're the main criteria. Thank you for the question. All right, that brings us to time. So I am going to close the webinar. So I would like to thank Lauren and Mark for setting this up. Thank you to Milica, Karizki, Mashiyyat and Josphat for sharing your experiences. And everyone, I look forward to getting your applications and seeing some of you in July. Thanks, everyone.